Welcome, everyone, to our webinar today. We are so excited to have you join us. My name is Carla Working. I'm the Director of Clergy Care and Development at the Education and Clergy Office at headquarters. Pardon my cough. We are excited to be joined today by Stacy Dumbacher. She is with Run Hard, Rest Well, and she has personally been somebody that I have been influenced and encouraged by. Stacy has 25 years of experiencing in managing and developing programs. She not only develops, she works with clients, she delivers follow-up material, and now her role is the Director of Programs for the Run Hard, Rest Well organization. So Stacy, thank you for being with us today, and I'm going to turn the reins over to you. We are just excited to hear from you today.
Great. Thank you so much, Carla. And I am super excited to be here today and to just be able to engage with you and to share a little bit of our message. So I'm gonna jump in. Our seminar today, the official title is A Rest That Works. And I want to start off, I always start off with the thing that is most important to me. And honestly, that's my family. A lot of people ask kind of, what does my life look like? And so I'm married. I've been married 25 years. I still like my husband. So I think we're doing pretty good. And I have three beautiful daughters. I have one that came to us through the gift of adoption. I have one biological child, and then I have a bonus child who came into our family as an 18-year-old. And so I love to spend time with them. I'm also a youth leader. I love teenagers, which most people are like, no, I'm like, give them all to me. Absolutely. And I spend a lot of time with kids in my free time, and I also love to cook. So that's a little bit about me and my passion. And then my passion is Run Hard, Rest Well. And really it's because the message changed my life. And so I get the opportunity to share some of the things that I have learned and that I am still learning. And I love that opportunity. So I want to start with our title, Run Hard. We're called to run. We're called to give everything we have as a serving for the Lord. But we are equally called to rest, to connect with the Lord, and to be refilled by who he is and what he has for us. And so that's why we're called Run Hard, Rest Well. We are thought leaders in the area of restorative wellness, which is what we're going to talk about the rest of the time we're here. We're evidence informed, which means we've been doing some research that shows people who are really intentional about resting are more satisfied, just in general. And then lastly, we're really big into the change theory. And there's honestly thousands of change theories. But the bottom line, the one that I really focus on, is the fact that nothing I say in the next hour will change anyone. Literally nothing I say. Because it is not what we hear that changes us, right? Like, we know donuts are bad for us. Yes. We know that. We have that knowledge, right? And
but yet we eat so good.
Yes, that's right. We eat them anyway. But what really changes us is what we do with the information we know. And part of that, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here today, it's also about what our community does that impacts how we implement things. So that's a little bit about us. Before I go on, I do want to remind everybody that they have a handout, and that's an engaging handout. So I'm going to ask you guys to fill in some blanks, and you might write some answers on that. And so make sure you have that with you. And before I go on and I jump into our content, I would like to thank you guys. As pastors, that's a big role, and that comes with a lot of weight. And I just want to thank you so much for pouring in to people who are easy to love and people who are hard to love, pouring into people in Christ's name so they can truly find freedom. And I know, because I have several friends who are pastors, that it can be exhausting. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today. Okay, so let's jump in.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention that when they print that off or they just fill that up, if they have questions or comments, I would love for them to include those in the chat, throw them in the comments, and we will address those, because it's not just between you and I today. We want as much participation as possible. If you notice that the audio is a little bit delayed, we're just having some technical issues, but we know that we love technology until it doesn't work the way we want it to. So maybe listen more than watch today if the audio isn't matching up with our lips, but feel free to join in by commenting on the chat today.
Absolutely. And I would second that. I love to have that feedback. And I think other people do too, right?
Absolutely.
So wellness is a really hot topic. We talk about it all the time. We see it in magazines, we see it on TV, but the reality is we're actually more unhealthy as Americans than we've ever been before. We actually pay twice as much for medical care, but are more unhealthy than other countries that are similar to us.
Wow.
And current wellness focuses on diet, fitness, medical markers. All of those things are really important, but they're not enough. So restorative wellness really focuses on kind of those core beliefs that drive our overload and exhaustion. And that is why so many of us are unhealthy, because we are exhausted, absolutely exhausted. So let's take a look at restorative wellness. So Carla, what do you think of when you hear the word restore? There's
I
no
think
right and wrong answer on this, by the way.
that's good, because before we started, I said, Stacy, don't stump me in front of all these people. But when I think of the word restore, and would love to hear anyone else on what they would think of, I think of taking what was originally intended and to bring it back. We just did a restoration project on our house, so to bring back what was once a really good thing, to make it beautiful again. That's what I think of when I hear that word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's perfect. And that's what restorative wellness is. It looks at the fact that all day long, we are pouring our lives out, right? We pour it into plans, projects, and people. We take everything the Lord has given us, our skills, our talents, our successes, our failures, our gifts, and we pour all day long. So I want you to kind of envision with me, Carla, a glass of water, right? And we wake up and that glass of water is full. And throughout the day, it slowly empties. So I want to list some things that I'm guessing for pastors, at least a lot of my pastor friends, really empty their cup. Okay. So let's say that there might be drama in the congregation. Right. And that you just pour out a little water and then you go on. And those people who leave the church, even if they leave for really good reasons or relocating, that's a lot of grief work that pastors have to do. Right. And then there's hospital visits and there's the financials, which pastors don't get into this for the financials. Right. So that can be really draining. And then you have caring for your family. And I feel like a lot of the people I work with kind of feel stretched. Like, where do I give my energy? I love my family. I want them to be my priority, but there are so many people with needs in my congregation. And all day long, you pour and you pour and you pour until eventually you have nothing left. Right. I wonder if anybody listening can kind of feel that emptiness, right? That I have nothing else to give. I want to give, but I just don't have it. And then here's the thing, Carla, for us to wake up with a full cup and empty out throughout the day, that's okay. But this is where so many of us are. We wake up and we already don't have anything in our cup.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous for us and the people around us. And so we have to look at how to fill up that cup. And restorative wellness is based on bucket theory 101, which is you can't give what you don't have. Okay. So here's the thing. I think there's a little flaw in this statement. And that's because I feel like we can give for a short time out of an empty bucket. But what are some negative things that happen when we try to give when we are exhausted? And that question is for you, Carla, and anybody else out there that would like to add that. What are some things that happen?
For me, because you're right, I think especially in ministry, we're good at faking it because, you make it work, right? But sometimes there's bitterness and that resentment that can come in, or if I'm, trying to love out of an unfilled bucket, it just doesn't feel genuine to me. I feel, that fake it till you make it. I feel that fakeness. And then there's sometimes, even for me personally, then it goes into like self-esteem, self-doubt, because I know I'm not serving out of this genuineness. And so, I might resent the people I'm working with, or just know, man, if they really knew what I was thinking, they might not want to follow me as their pastor as much as I want them to.
Absolutely. And you really covered them all. Like there's literally a checklist and you just went down through them. And so, but what that tells us that all of us kind of feel that sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is we want to be our best. That's why we got into ministry, right? Is to show them who God was through what we say and what we do. But we just can't do that from an empty bucket. And I often ask people, why are you so tired? And they talk about, well, I have a special needs child. My parents are aging. I work 60 hours a week. I can't sleep. All of those reasons are true. But I want to look at, and actually there's 4 reasons societally that we're so tired. So number 1 is there's no models or mentors. So what I find is most people had a model on how to be really effective workers, right? Show up on time, have a good attitude, be part of the solution, right?
Right.
Most of us have not had someone that shows us how to rest in a way that helps us be our best. So number 1, no models or mentors. Number 2, there are never ending needs, demands, and opportunities. Like never, especially when you're involved in a church, right? They don't go away. There's always something else you can do.
Yes.
The church has stopped teaching about rest. We consistently don't from the pulpit teach how to rest. What does that look like? And what are the blessings? God wants to pour out blessings to us in the midst of our rest. But we are such a performance-oriented society that often takes center stage. Where are you using your gifts? Very, very important question. We need to be using our gifts, but also, how are you connecting with the Lord on one-on-one? How is he refilling you, right? Because we're supposed to give from the overflow that we have.
Right.
And so often, for me even, I'm often giving from what I have, not the overflow, right? And then lastly, our faulty understanding of rest. And when I first heard this message about 10 years ago, this one hit me really hard because I realized our society views rest as foolish. You know, it says
I'll
you
sleep when I'm dead, right?
Yes,
I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Absolutely. And you snooze, you lose. That's another one.
Absolutely.
It's earned, which is what you were talking about, Carla. Right. I will rest when the work is done. What's the problem with that?
It's never done. There's especially, I mean, I think anywhere, but especially in ministry, there's one more person that you can reach. There's always something that you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's shameful. This is one that really hit me. I have a to-do list. And if I can't handle that to-do list, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
Not there's something wrong with the expectation. There's something wrong with me as a person. And that one hit me really hard. I am a very type A performance-oriented person. And I really had to hear this message and really focus on it to work through that shame I was feeling.
Absolutely.
It's selfish. God calls us to give our life away. I shouldn't have any needs. Boy, that's a lie. That is like, because if you look at Jesus's life, again and again and again, he withdrew from people. Right. And if Jesus had to do that, who am I? Who am I to say I don't need it? Right. And then what's that, Carla?
I was just going to say, there were times when they had to wake him up because he was like, I'm going to take a nap. Right. And he wasn't ashamed of it. He wasn't being selfish. He understood the importance of it. And we don't get that.
Yeah. And I don't hear any guilt language in what Jesus talks about. I never hear guilt language. I love it. And then lastly, we often think that escape is the same thing as rest. So often we go throughout our day and we perform and we succeed and we connect with people and we talk about Jesus and we go and then we get home and we fall in front of a TV, we fall in front of our phone, we fall in front of gaming instead of running to something that's really going to fill us up. Those things are more escape mechanisms. I've never done a Netflix binge where on the other side of it, I felt really good. Right? Yeah. I mean, I may have escaped a little bit, but I don't really feel recharged. Right. And that kind of lifestyle leads to overloaded, that feeling of just being overloaded. And so often when you talk to people and you say, how are you doing? You get 2 answers. One is fine. Everything's fine. Great.
Right.
And the other one is I'm tired. And then they list all the things they're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And in the church, it's almost like a badge.
Yes. Yes.
It's almost like, look at all the things I'm doing for Jesus. We are called to do things for Jesus. That is not where our confidence is supposed to be. Right. And that's something I am very guilty about historically. Like, let me tell you all the things I'm doing for Jesus. Right.
Yeah. If you're exhausted for the Lord, then you must be doing something right. Like that's kind of this underlying theme, I think, that we've taught in the church.
And normalized. I feel like it's very normalized. But the people I want to spend the most time with, honestly, Carla, are those people that that know that they're enough.
Yeah.
You know, those people that don't have to go. They want to be effective. They serve well, but they also are a person of peace and they're not exhausted. Because when we're overloaded, we're winded, worn, and weary. We're wounded. And here's the really big one. And this is the first underline. Actually, it's the second one. We're wounding. We're wounding.
That's good.
Who do you think we might be wounding to, Carla? Can you name one or two?
I think I'll just speak out of my own personal experience. I'm wounding the people that I love the most, right? They get the overflow of my exhaustion. So they get the bottom of the barrel, and to use your bucket theory, like they get the scrape in the bottom, and I'm wounding them unintentionally. And it's always the ones I'm closest to that get that first.
Yeah, that was a real conviction for me when I first heard this message, because like I can go to work and put on a really good face, right? Absolutely. And I can do what I need to do and accomplish what I need to accomplish. And then volunteering with those teenagers who I love, I can really be my best for them. But it is the people at home. Yeah. But then I was really faced with, when I stand before the Lord, what I want to know more than anything else is that I loved my family well.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So on your handout, it actually asked you, what does overload feel like for you? And Carla, I'm going to ask you if you would either write a couple words or draw a picture. And for those of you listening, pause right here. It's in the middle of page 1, and it says, what does overload feel like for you? And I'm just going to pause for about a minute, and then I'd love for you to share, Carla, if you would. Sure. While Carla's writing, I'm going to tell a little bit about what overload feels like for me. So overload often feels like something's heavy is on my chest because I don't breathe as deeply as I usually do. Another thing that happens is that I feel like I have to accomplish all things right now, and I almost become frantic. And then when I do that, though, I do none of them well. And then the big thing for me is I switch from a relational person to a task-oriented person. And I can really hurt those people that I'm in relationship with, even if they're helping me with the task. Those are some of the things that I, in my overload, really struggle with. And lastly, I actually have a physical response, and my eyes begin to twitch when I feel overloaded. And so I'm also hearing from Sarah Rodriguez, and she said, overload feels for me where I don't have time for what's really important. Absolutely. Like you can't get to your priorities. That's really good, Sarah. Thanks for sharing. How about you, Carla?
I made a long list. So I'm just exhausted. I just feel, and I'm not interested in the things I normally am interested in, or in the flip side, I'll kind of hyper focus on things that aren't that important, but I need to cross something off my list. I need to like feel like I'm doing something. I will be really forgetful of the things that I normally wouldn't, because it's like my brain can't handle one more item. And then the last one I put was, I can be emotional in a very non-logical way, maybe reacting in a negative way or just feeling overwhelmed. Those are that overload symptoms, the things that normally bring me joy. It's just, I'm done. I have no more capacity. I've reached capacity.
Mm-hmm. That's really good, Carla. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah. Joy is often a first casualty to overload.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, we understand the need to recharge, right? Like, what do we do with this phone every night to make sure it works its best, right? You plug it in. We never forget that. We never forget that. And then with cars, we put gas in it, we get the tires rotated. So we understand the concept. It's really more about applying it. That's really the challenge, right? And so let's take a moment. We talked about what rest does, or excuse me, what happens when we don't rest, and what are some of the consequences for ourselves and those around us. But now let's redefine rest, because society says that rest is foolish and selfish. We know those things aren't true. That's right. So let's redefine it. Okay. So this redefinition comes from Exodus, and it says, 6 days do your work, but on the seventh day do not work, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and so that the slave and your households and the foreigners living in the area may be refreshed. May be refreshed. And that's the key there. To rest well is to do what refreshes. Yeah. So that's a fill in the blank there. And that's a really key thing to our message. To rest well is to do what refreshes. And on your handout, a little bit lower, it actually gives you some examples of how Jesus sought refreshment from pulling away from other people, from experiencing rest. And we don't have time to go over that today, but I really wanted it in there just so people could really dig into that on their own, right? Brenda Jank, our founder, says this about rest. Rest is not a reward. You cannot earn it. You do not deserve it. It will never be convenient. Rest is a rhythm and a responsibility for those committed to God's best. And I love that, because bottom line is, we cannot be our best if we are not connecting to the God who created us. We just can't. We just can't. And so we're gonna,
go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say, I really love the word responsibility. Maybe again, because I like tasks, but we often see rest as the thing we do when we have the time, rather than it's this expectation from God. It was not a suggestion, it was an expectation. And we love to follow the commands of God, where we're doing, but doing rest is still, you're still doing something. So I love that word Brenda uses on responsibility. Maybe that'll help some people that are task oriented people. Maybe they'll be able to kind of catch on to it a little bit more with that word. It is a responsibility. Love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you look at, we often say at Run Hard, Rest Well that the American church is a 9-commandment church, because we do not honor the Sabbath in a way that it was originally designed. In general, there are some people that do. I've met some people who honor the Sabbath beautifully, but the majority of us do not. And then you have that commandment, but then you also have Jesus saying, live as I lived. Yeah. And he showed this amazing example of pulling away to grieve before he made big decisions, to connect with his Father when he was just heading for the cross and knew what was coming, right? We just see him again and again. So let's talk about 4 buckets of rhythms of rest that we talk about. So at Run Hard, Rest Well, we talk about 4 rhythms of rest. And all 4 of these are designed to refill our bucket in fun, healthy, biblical, life-giving ways. So first of all, Sabbath, we just talked about that. Sabbath is an invitation to take your foot off the gas and just kind of coast, maybe even stop, right? My husband, one of the things he does every Sabbath, there is a nap in there somewhere. He just stops. And one of the things that I've found, especially for families, right, is that the overload and the fast-paced life is not conducive for healthy relationships. When we don't stop it is really hard to have those healthy relationships. And most people that are closest to each one of us spell love Time.
Yeah.
Time together, to be together, to laugh together, to cry together, to live life together, right? I want to read a quote by Eugene Peterson. He says, Sabbath is that uncluttered time and space in which we can distance ourselves from our own activities enough to see what God is doing. Isn't that a great quote?
Beautiful. I love that.
And I think it's so needed because so often we're so busy doing what we think we need to be doing that we miss out on what God wants us to see and what God is doing.
Absolutely.
So there's a couple tips I wanted to give for Sabbath, and this is on your handouts. As you're looking at Sabbath, these are 3 questions I always encourage people to ask, okay? So number 1, how can I connect with God in a way that sets my heart on fire? And I think that this is a key for pastors because you, as a pastor, you think through the lens of how can I communicate the love of God to people so they understand it? And that is exactly what you need to be doing. And I'm so glad that God has called you to that. But so often as pastors, and even me as a youth leader, as I read scripture, I see it through how can I teach my kids instead of what does this mean in my own heart? Right? And so to really think about how do I personally connect with Jesus in a way that sets my heart on fire is so incredibly important. The next one is, who can I spend time with, or how can I spend time with those I hold near and dear? How can we spend time with the people that are most important to us? Maybe it's a play date, right? With your kids or your grandkids or your nieces and nephews. Maybe it's a special time with your spouse. Maybe it's coming together as a family and doing silly things. There's this book called Smashed Burritos, and it's all about like biblical lessons in crazy ways. Maybe it's something like that, right? And then how can I connect with what is going on inside of me without avoiding, stuffing, or escaping?
It's a great question.
And if you think about it, like some people will be like, oh, it's, you shouldn't be emotional. It's all about God. But if you look at the Psalms and you look at David, I mean, he looked at what was going on inside of him, right? And we're called to do the same because God gave us emotions for a reason.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's Sabbath. The next one is stillness. Stillness is a daily infusion of peace. Stillness is you and your Bible and just some connection time. And here again, I'm not talking about being in the Word to prepare for a sermon, but being in the Word for you, for Him to refresh you and your heart and your spirit. And I often think that we think of stillness as being still. And sometimes that's very true. But sometimes stillness is a walk.
Yeah.
With no technology to enjoy the beauty. Sometimes stillness is my daughter, when she is having a really hard day, she actually dances. She puts on music and she dances, and it stills her internally. And we need both, right? We need both.
Yeah, I know for myself, it's sometimes when my body is moving, my mind can slow down enough to listen. So you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's physical stillness, and other times we move so the rest of us can be still. I
actually love how you said that, Carla. I might have to quote you on that. Can I do that?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I love that. I love that. That your body has to move for your inner self to calm down. That's really good. Stillness spiritually replenishes us. Planned or unplanned, stillness is an intentional pause that nurtures joy, gratitude, and a sense of purpose. It's a time to, and this is on your handout, it's a time to reflect. It is a time to practice Thanksgiving. I think Thanksgiving is so important. I actually talk about Thanksgiving as my superpower. When I'm having a really bad day, if I can be mindful enough to switch to what I am thankful for, when I go back to that really bad day, it hasn't changed, but my perspective has.
Right.
Thankfulness is so incredibly important. I'm not sure that it says there's a sound that somebody keeps hearing in the chat. So let me know if there's anything I can do to help with that, or if there's something I'm doing. Maybe it's a bracelet hitting the table. I don't know. But you let me know, Carla, if you figure it out, and I'll fix it.
I sure will.
So here's my top tips for stillness. Number one, practice deep gratitude. And you can do that by setting a timer on your phone and just say, you know what, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes and just think about all the things we're thankful for. And one of the things I always come back to is I've traveled internationally some. And I look at whenever I come back, right? So I've gone to mostly impoverished countries. And whenever I come back, I'm deeply, deeply sad. Not because they don't have anything, but because we have everything and yet we are so unhappy as a culture.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've learned that just practicing that deep gratitude puts things into perspective about what's really important. Second of all, deep breathing is really helpful to kind of internally calm and physically calm. And so we're actually going to take a minute and do some deep breathing because it is one of the best functional strategies I teach people. Okay. So Carla, if you would sit up straight in your chair, and anybody else listening, we're going to take a deep breath in, and you can take a deep breath in through your nose. We're going to hold it for 4 seconds, and I'm going to count for anybody on the screen, and I'll count out loud. For anybody who's just listening. And then you're going to exhale slowly and completely through your nose or your mouth.
Okay.
Okay. So inhale, hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale slowly and completely. And again, inhale, hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. And do that one more time. And inhale. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. How does that feel, Carla?
One of my favorite activities. Recently started meeting with a spiritual director, and that's how we start our time. And it's refreshing. Just even, I don't know the science behind it, but just to take those breaths, it's like my mind feels like slow down, and my body's just, it's like, oh, I'm happy. I got some breaths. So I love that. So we could do that for the next 30 minutes. Probably no one else wants to listen to breathing, but I just love that activity.
Awesome. Awesome. Let me tell you the science really quickly, and then we're going to keep going. Basically, what happens is your diaphragm expands. It hits your vagus nerve your vagus nerve runs along your spine and comes out right here in your collarbones. And that vagus nerve tells your parasympathetic nervous system to have your body relax. It's all science. Isn't that crazy?
That's great. I love that.
Solitude, really quickly. Solitude is taking time to step away from the fray. To fray means to come apart. So stepping away from the things that make you come apart. Solitude is time alone where you can really connect with what's going on inside with you and what the Lord has for you. Solitude is a time off the beaten path, free of demands and distractions. We recommend a time of solitude about every quarter, actually. Top tips for solitude. Number 1, schedule it. Everything that we find important is on our calendar. Yes. You can tell a whole lot about people's priorities when you look at their calendar, right? So if we're going to make rest important, we're going to have to schedule it. And number 2, journaling is a great way to connect in prayer, but also to connect with what's going on inside with you during a time of solitude. And now here we are, dun, da, 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 sleep. If you want to be nicer, smarter, healthier, thinner, better focus, all you have to do is go to sleep.
Done.
Yeah, done. Check how many hours of sleep did you get last night, Carla?
I'm so glad you asked. I prepared for this. So I got lots of sleep last night. Like I got 8 hours of sleep. Most nights I would not want to answer that question, but last night I knew you were going to ask. So I actually went to bed early because I wanted to be able to answer that.
That is awesome. That's great. There was a meme that I saw last week and it said, I got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 3 days, but I got 8 hours of sleep. Right. Often put the place where many of us live, because the national health crisis actually talks about the fact that 40 to 60% of American adults do not get the amount of sleep that they need.
Oh.
And do you know that the number one indicator of workplace burnout is someone who consistently sleeps 6 hours or less?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So sleep is so important. Prioritizing restorative sleep positions us for vibrancy and health. Science tells us we need 7 to 9 hours a night. But here's the reality. God designed our bodies to need sleep. During sleep, everything is repaired throughout our entire body. And so we have to decide, are we gonna honor the way God has made our bodies with sleep? Or are we gonna keep pushing it? Like, I got it. Nope, I gotta do more. I got it. No, God designed your body to need that. Push into that, right? That's so much where we get rest. And it's really interesting because I coach people. And the first thing I talk to them about is how much is their sleeping? Because it's harder to do anything else if you don't get enough sleep. Right. Sleep is so incredibly important. So we're going to take the next 20 minutes and we're going to talk about how can I get better sleep? And I want you to know that sleep kind of goes in cycles, and it depends on your age, depends on the challenges that you have. If you have little kids, if you're in your 50s, our bodies change a lot. And so with sleep, we often have to try different things. And then one thing will work for a couple of years and then all of a sudden it won't. That's just kind of how our bodies are. And that's okay. I'm going to share a lot of tips. Some of them are going to work really well. And some of them, they just won't work for you. And that is okay. We are all different. Okay. But I'm going to go pretty quickly with some really good recommendations.
Yeah. And while you're doing that, before, I'm just going to mention, this is going to be recorded. So if you're like, I didn't catch all those, or I want to recommend this, you'll be able to go back and go to this. I mean, you'll be able to go to the whole video, but you can go back to this little portion if you want. Or like me, I've heard some of this before, but I need this refresher. So this is recorded. So you guys will be able to listen again.
Awesome. I do want to read Joel Pascua. I'm not sure how to say that. Carla, can you help me?
I think you did great. I think it's Pascua.
Pascua says this: even musical scores want rest. God's people need this so they will understand, experience the harmony, rhythms of each phase of ministry. I love that. Thank you so much, Joel, for sharing. Thank you. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
So set yourself up for a good night's sleep. The first thing we're going to talk about is what can you do during the day or in the evening that can help your body fall asleep once it's time for bedtime. So number one, drink water, which is crazy. Okay. Crazy. But studies show that 66 to 80, oh, good job, Carla. She's drinking her water. 66 to 80% of people do not drink enough water. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't feel thirsty. But the reality is once you're thirsty, your body is already dehydrated. Right. Okay. So let me tell you a couple things that water does. Number one, it impacts your energy. Our brains are made up of 70% water. When we don't drink enough water, we may notice the feeling of tired and even kind of slow thinking. It impacts our emotions. And this one I have tested again and again and again. Because remember, I have had 2.5 children that I've raised. All girls with really big emotions. And one of the techniques I started to do when they came home from school is I put a glass of water in front of them. I said, drink that water up and then let's talk. And it was amazing. The emotion level went down with those conversations. And so even being short 2 cups of water a day can impact the way we handle and process emotions. Our focus, if we're dehydrated, the ability to focus on one task almost completely disappears. Our overall happiness. And the reason they say that is because water helps our body produce serotonin, which is one of our feel-good hormones. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, it greatly impacts our sleep. And I was at Concordia High School a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to the woman that brought me into her honors students class to share a little bit about rest. And she had talked about how her husband and her, like 5 years ago, were like, you know what, we're not drinking enough water. Let's do something silly and drink a gallon a day. And they had a lot of surprising positive results. But the first one she noticed was she began to sleep. So water is really important.
Okay.
Understand the role of cortisol. Okay. So cortisol is this incredible thing that our body produces. What happens when we're faced with a challenge? We produce adrenaline and cortisol, and it kind of surges through our body to help us overcome that obstacle. And it helps us boost our heart rate and blood pressure. It tenses our muscles and it sharpens our focus so we can overcome anything. It's a really good thing, right?
Right. Absolutely. In ministry, we have all used cortisol one time or another.
Absolutely. It probably in the last hour would be my guess.
Right.
But what happens is if we're always in crisis and we're always feeling like we have to overcome something, you hit your body into something called cortisol overload. Cortisol overload leads to depression, anxiety, lack of focus, weight gain, sleep issues, impacts our ability to have healthy relationships, and it gives us a low libido. It also increases our blood pressure and decreases our immune response. And there's actually tons more that I just didn't have space to put in there. And so cortisol overload is a really big deal. But when you practice a lot of these things that we talk about, deep breathing, stillness, solitude, silence, sleeping, it impacts our cortisol, right? And it helps us be able to manage life in a much healthier way. And one of the things to know is that every night we don't get 7 hours of sleep. We actually produce twice as much cortisol all day long.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it's so incredibly damaging. Here's a couple really quick tips on how to just reduce cortisol throughout the day. Stretching, exercise, deep breathing, and time spent outdoors all help reduce cortisol. And when you're feeling that it feels like stress is probably how you would classify it. More than likely, that is actually just an enhanced amount of cortisol in your body. And that stress feeling is a great time to go, oh, wait a minute, I'm having that feeling. I'm going to do some of these strategies.
Love that.
Exercise. Do something. Walk, weights, yoga, shoot hoops, whatever it might be. Just move. Movement is really, throughout the day, is really important for sleep at night. Number one is, especially if you go outside when you're exposed to daylight, that helps your body get into a rhythm of day, night, and will actually help you fall asleep quicker. Exercise relieves stress and anxiety that your body pins up. How often do people lay in bed like this and they just can't calm? Exercise helps with that. And then exercise basically just tires you out, right?
Right.
Definitely tires me out.
Amen.
Eat protein, nuts, eggs, peanut butter, avocados. This has shown to help in a couple of ways. Number one is that eating protein helps your blood sugar not tank in the middle of the night. Often when your blood sugar tanks at the middle of the night, you wake up. Another thing that it does is that and there was an article that I'll just read. It says, eating a moderate amount of protein before bed may also improve your quality of sleep because it produces chemicals that assist in your body producing natural melatonin, which is what puts you to sleep at night. Okay. So, and we've had people, we've been speaking for Run Hard, Rest Well for about 7 years now. And I've actually had people come up to me and say, I'm sleeping for the first time. And all I did was add a handful of almonds right before bed. Now, I will tell you, for me, it didn't work, right? So again, all of us are different, right? That's why I'm giving so many options here. Talk through problems. How often do we lay in bed at night and think through all the things that we chose not to process throughout the day?
Yeah.
Right? So talking through problems is really important. It reduces stress, it reduces anxiety, and if you process them during the day, you're not going to be awake at night processing them.
Stacey, I found that it's when you're not doing the other things like solitude and stillness, you've never given your brain time to just so that's another reason for me, it hits me at night because I'm finally like still and quiet. So I've encouraged people that have struggled, like, oh, my mind races at night. I tell them maybe it's because you haven't given your mind time to slow down during the day. So if you're doing those other things you talked about, then that also, I think, helps your mind not race and keep you up at night.
Carly, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're
Sure.
exactly right. You're exactly right. That's good. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So now we're going to talk about making sleep happen. So now this is tips for bedtime. Number one, set a bedtime. Okay. So I don't care if you're 15 or 75. Setting a bedtime, what it does is it helps your body know what it's supposed to do. The second one is have a routine. Do the same things right before you go to bed. Maybe the same 4 or 5 things. So my routine is I pick up around the house, I brush my teeth, I take a bath, and I read a book. Those are my things. And what it does is it kind of signals your body, hey, it's getting that time, right? And I was coaching a pastor, and he was a dual job pastor. How do you say that?
We call those bivocational in the Wesleyan Church, bivocational.
Yes, that's the right word. And he was very busy. And his name was Richard. He's an amazing man. And I started coaching him. The first thing I said is, Richard, we have to get you sleeping. I'd like you to set a bedtime and set a routine. And he said nothing. And I said, Richard? And he's like, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not a middle school boy. I don't need a bedtime. And I said, will you just try it for 6 weeks? And he said, yeah, I'll try it for 6 weeks. You're coaching me. I'll listen. 6 weeks later, I talked to him. Richard, how you doing? He's like, I'm doing really good. I said, you are? And he's like, Stacy, I'm sleeping for the first time in like 20 years.
Wow.
And then 6 weeks later, he was doing even better. And I said, why are you doing even better? He said, I'm sleeping, so now I have time to exercise. And I coached him for about 9 months, and I didn't see him for 2 years. And I saw him last May. He's lost 125 pounds.
Wow.
Right? So Sarah shared that the district actually plans a day of solitude for all pastors twice a year. Huh, that's amazing. Well done.
Yes. Whatever district, I don't have the list in front of me, Sarah, your district gets like a gold star, because because when you put it on the calendar, then you show it's a priority. And I love that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Stop screens 1 hour to bed. Now I say this. Yeah, well, the reality is I actually changed it. Science actually tells us it's 2 to 3 hours before bed.
Oh, wow.
But people roll their eyes at me when I say that. So I changed it to an hour. Keep your room cool and dark. Now, I have always heard this, and this is actually something that I've started to do because I'm having a little bit more challenges of sleeping, and it's really helped. I couldn't find an article that tells you why. So I'm going to tell you now, all of these other things, I have articles that say this is why and blah, blah, blah. This one, I don't, but I'm telling you, for me, at least it works. I know why. I shouldn't say that. I know why the light, because light keeps your brain active, but the actual cold, I don't know why, except I get a snuggle in my comforter, and I like that. I don't know. Don't sleep with your phone, kids, or pets in your room. It was really interesting. I was doing this presentation, and the woman's like, oh, I sleep with my kids and my dog. And my dog gets up like 4 times a night, and it weighs like 80 pounds and wakes me up. I'm like, get the dog out of your bed. Now, it's really easy to say that. And I do know that it's a process to get kids out of your bed, right? It's a process, and that's okay. But long-term, that's not a great resolution for your child or you.
Right. Absolutely.
Deep breathing, which we already talked about. So I won't go any more into that. And then take a bath. I had to work really hard to find a male in the bathtub, because so often I think we think females bathtub. No, dudes love baths too. I'm just saying. Okay.
And it's not like you're telling them to put candles out and, you're just that relaxing. Although I would ask, Stacy, do you feel like when you take a bath, certain scents are helpful compared to others? No. Now
I know a lot of people who put like lavender in their bath. I just don't need it. I don't need it, but I do Epsom salt in my bath every single night. So, and I love that. And that is a calming effect, and it gives you magnesium, and magnesium naturally helps your body relax.
Right.
So I recommend that. And there's actually some research that talks about a warm bath 1 to 3 hours before bed can help you sleep well.
Right. Love that.
And this last one here, check out our website for an additional sleep help. So Run Hard, if you go to Run Hard, Rest Well, and I have a picture of it right here, go to resources and then free resources. There's an 8-page PDF about different strategies to help you sleep. I'm going to check my, awesome. I just checked the chat and somebody got a gold star for those days of solitude. I love it.
That's right. North Carolina East gets the gold star for.
That's awesome. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have you guys set some goals. And what I'd like you to do is, if you're listening to this, just hit pause once I give you the time to set goals, because we're not actually going to give you space in the recording. Okay. But what you'll do is on page 3, halfway down, it says, my commitment to taking small steps to embrace restorative wellness. At Run Hard, Rest Well, we talk about this fact that long-term change comes from small steps in the right direction. And after 10, almost 11 years of this journey, mine has all been very small steps in the right direction, right? And has changed my life, and I'm still working on it. And so I'd like you guys to take a minute and answer these 3 questions. What are 2 strategies I would like to apply in the next week? 2 things that we talked about. It can be from sleep, but hey, if you're a great sleeper, but that whole solitude or stillness kind of rang true in your heart, what would you like to try? Who would benefit from me being well rested? And who can I share my knowledge with? Because as pastors, right? As pastors, people are watching you for cues of what is important and what not is important. And if you can make sure that your community knows that Sabbath is important by taking a Sabbath yourself, that is so incredibly important to them. And so pause the video and fill that out. And so, but what I would like to ask you, Carla, is what is maybe one thing you heard today that you're like, you know what? Either I'm going to start doing that, or, oh, I used to do that. I need to get back to it.
Sure. Oh, well, okay. So I don't get enough sleep every night, and I am really guilty of the screens before bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and you know, the tough thing is, and I think I'm like 80% or more of people, like my phone is my alarm. So it's like right next to me, but finding a way to not literally have my phone next to the bed. So that way I can still have an alarm, but not have that excuse of being on a screen before bed. I think that would be, because it's not necessarily that I have trouble falling asleep. It's that as long as I'm looking at a screen, I'm not falling asleep. And if I would just put it down, I would actually close my eyes and maybe get that 7 hours or more that I desperately need. Like I said, last night I prepared so I could tell you, but most nights it's closer to 6 hours at the most. So I think putting that phone away would be really helpful.
Awesome. And I think you're probably not alone in that. And often people will say, well, excuse me. Well, how can I do this? My phone is my alarm. And I'm like, guys, Dollar General, like $5.75 for an alarm. We can fix this problem, right? Absolutely. So I do want to ask, as we look at, as pastors, you look at this message, and hopefully you hear just the life-giving that Jesus wants to do through these 4 rhythms of rest, how he wants to prepare you to be your best. He also wants your congregation to be their best. So I want you to just think about, is there a way we can impact your conversation or your congregation, excuse me? Is there a time that we can spend with them kind of like we are now? We have a Bible study that's great for small groups. We have a video series that's cost effective and very engaging. So as you're setting out there, if you're like, man, I'd love to share this message, let me know. My information is on that handout. I'd love to talk to you about it. And then we're going to end here by minutes matters, hours make a difference, and a day away delivers. And I'm going to give you an example of how minutes matter. Even those small steps are so incredibly important as we're on this journey to learn how to rest. So there was a group of people all clinically depressed. All of them were on medication, and all of them were seeing a therapist. And they took that group and they cut them in half, and they took their medical markers, their mental health medical markers, showing how healthy or unhealthy they were. And they told one group, keep doing what you're doing. See your counselor, take your medication. The other group, they said, see your counselor, take your medication, and go outside 5 minutes a day. Anytime, any place, doesn't matter. 5 minutes a day, go outside. And they did that for 8 weeks. And at the end of the 8 weeks, they brought them back together and they took their mental health medical markers. And this group that basically did what they were always doing, saw the counselor, take medication, virtually no change. They weren't doing worse, but they weren't doing better either. This group that added 5 minutes a day outside, every single one of their mental health medical markers were increasing. They were feeling better. And there was actually a subgroup from that group that came completely out of clinical depression. And they all had one thing in common. And that one thing is they took their outside time by a body of water. Isn't that great? Reminds me of Psalm 23, right? And so the reason I like to end with that is because sometimes we can go to conferences and we can hear all these great ideas and we're like, oh, let's do this. And it's kind of overwhelming. And I just want to encourage all those that are listening, right, to just focus on those 1 or 2 steps you can take and then add another one later, because we can so easily become overwhelmed. And that is so not the message we want you to hear. We want you to hear that God has amazing things for you in these 4 rhythms of rest, things that can help you be connected to him, to feel his love at a very deep level and be your best. So that's it.
Thank you, Stacy. We're so thankful. And I will reiterate, if you want to connect with Stacy on that handout that's been posted, or if you're listening at a later time, you can go to the Run Hard Rest Well website and see all that they have. They can take this information and they have ways to expand it for youth, for your congregation, maybe your team in your district, maybe you're part of a leadership cohort, whatever it would look like. I'm not trying to advertise for them, but I believe the more we talk about the ways that God intended for us to have a thriving life through this restorative wellness, because we were, as Stacy started this time, we were intended to run and run hard. We were intended to work for the Lord, but we were also intended to rest. And everything Stacy has talked about, the science behind it, that's God created. He made all of that. So we are honoring what God has created us to be when we rest the way that he intended for us. So reach out, go to their website, see what they have available. This is recorded. It's going to be on the ECD website, and you'll be able to share this with others. We're just so thankful that you have joined us. And thank you, Stacy, for giving us this hour and giving us these very practical ways and reminders of how we can rest. If you guys have any questions, you feel free to reach out to Stacy, or if you have any continuing thoughts, you can reach out to me at theeducation@wesleyan.org. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.